Hello and welcome to Lost in Sci-Fi and Fantasy. I'm your host Leo, and this week we are doing a bit of another double bill. This time, focusing on two adaptations of Treasure Island. Namely, the 1950 adaptation from Disney, as well as the 2002 adaptation Treasure Planet, also from Disney. So, why did I pick these two specifically? Well, that's because the 1950s one seemed like a fairly loyal adaptation of the book. I hadn't watched it before, so I figured it should be a good thing to try. Plus, I did the 1950s version of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea when I did that book, so why not do the same thing with this? Then, I also wanted to see what the story was like in a different-ish genre. That being sci-fi, as Treasure Planet takes the, classic pirate adventure and puts it in space. It's weird. So as it's going to be with the talking of the 1950s film, for the most part we'll just be talking the minor differences between the book and the movie. As for the most part it actually is quite faithful to the book. Save for a few changes here and there to kind of speed up the plot, it's not bad. Then the rest of the episode's probably going to be focused quite heavily on Treasure Planet, as that one does have a lot more changes, because again, they're putting it in space. So let's go ahead and get started. I don't really have any history with the original one. I've seen it around a couple times, though there is some interesting history to do with the actor who plays Jim Hawkins. That of Bobby Driscoll. Bobby Driscoll was a child actor during the time, and after this movie, he had done quite a bit of parts before, and then after this movie, he went on to voice Peter Pan. And sadly, his story is a tragic one that I won't really go into here, but if you are interested, feel free to look it up. But yeah, I found that very interesting because I was like, he seems kind of familiar. So what else was he in? And it was like, oh, he was the voice of Peter Pan. Neat. But, yes. Other than that, I don't really have any history with this movie. So, what are some of the major things that they changed? Because the story, like I said, is quite faithful to the original book. The major changes do start off right away when, instead of us following as Billy Bones comes into the Admiral Benbow and just kind of becomes a nuisance, we follow instead Black Dog as he comes to the Admiral Benbow, seeing if Billy Bones has come through. To which Jim says no, but looking off to the guy's right, he sees under the stairs a chest marked WB for William Bones. And so Black Dog immediately rushes off to come back later, and that's when we see that, Billy Bones has been around, he's terribly sick, Dr. Livesey's already been to visit, Jim's dad, gone, Jim's mom, in town, I guess, so Jim's just hanging out in the inn. There's a bit of a thing with Billy Bones as he goes to get more drink, but he shouldn't be drinking, but he's like, I don't care, I need to get my strength up to leave. And he digs out the chest and he grabs the treasure map, goes to stuff it in his shirt, but then he is almost stricken down with a heart attack, so he's like, go get help, and take the map so that if they come and ransack the place while you're gone, at least this isn't here when they do it. So Jim runs off, but runs into Pew, who then takes him back in to the inn and gives the black spot to Billy Bones. Now that actually, I think, happens before the digging around in the chest, but otherwise it's something that just happens really fast, and it's just because they wanted to fast forward through the beginning. They didn't even cast an actress for the mom. She does not appear in the movie at all, which, to be fair, is kind of what her role in the book is. Not really present. Anywho, Jim runs off, gets help. Squire and his men come, but it's too late. Billy Bones is dead, and the place has been ransacked. Oh well. But hey, treasure map, let's go get some treasure. So they set off to go do that. Though the next kind of change is that instead of the squire having already hired Long John and thus had Long John hire more people. Instead, he has hired Long John, but after taking Jim and Dr. Livesey in to eat at Long John's tavern, does he have Long John go ahead and hire the rest of the crew? So there's that. Then afterwards, they leave Jim with Long John to help Long John out because reasons Long John asked. Black Dog shows up like in the book, but instead of him just immediately sending someone off after Black Dog, he does, but Jim also went running after him. So the people that he tells to go get him assume that Long John's talking about Jim, so they grab him instead. And he's like, no, not him, the other guy. So then Long John spends some time trying to take any kind of suspicion away from Jim of him. And that's when he talks to him about Captain Flint, the parrot, and whatnot. And they hang out for a bit. Then Long John leaves to go find the rest of the crew. Then the next major change is one that it is Long John that inspires the use of apples, like having an apple barrel. But otherwise, we get to see a little bit more of the trip to Treasure Island. We see Mr. Arrow or Mr. Harrow made drunk and then fall overboard. Where in the book that might have actually been an accident, but it is implied that Long John did supply the alcohol that made him extra soused. But yeah, in the book, he's not much of a character. In this, he's a little bit more of a character, and then he's gone. Then, of course, Jim goes to get an apple. This time he's doing it to talk. He's talking with the pilot at the time, and he's like, okay, I'm going to go get an apple. And the pilot's like, hey, get me one. So Jim crawls into the barrel because they're really low on apples. And the reason that he goes is he's talking with the pilot or the man at helm. He's like, oh, I'm so excited to get to the island. Do you think we'll ever see land again, etc.? And the pilot's like, yeah, we will. But, crews tend to get rowdy. Like, you'll know we're getting close because crews tend to get rowdy because all of the drinks going and you're pretty much on scrap rations. You're on the stuff that you stock a ton of because it lasts long, of salt pork and bread and salt pork. And, of course, the apple barrel will be near empty, or it will be empty. So Jim's like, then I'll just go eat all the apples, and that'll get us to land faster, because he's a child. So he runs, goes into the barrel, and in the book, the barrel's flat empty. Like, he gets into the barrel, and he's like, there's none here. But in this, there actually are apples, but he decides to just chill in there and start eating. Of course, he then hears the conversation with the pirates, except instead of it being them recruiting a person for the mutiny, it's that everyone's getting restless and are ready to mutiny now. I mean, in the book, they kind of are ready to mutiny right then and there, but it's over them converting someone over to their side. He gives his explanation as to why they can't do that, and he's about to be stabbed on accident because in order to try to calm down the crew, Long John's trying to tell them to eat an apple. So he's like, come get an apple. And is about to stab in, but is stopped when they call for land, comes out. And they all rush up. Then, the next major change is after Jim tells the cabin party, or as they will become known as the cabin party, of the upcoming mutiny, they prepare. They're like, okay, we have all of these people. Oops, some of the guys that were supposed to be on our side aren't. Oh well, we'll deal with that later. The next major change is that as the people are leaving the ship to go onto the island, the mutiny just happens. So, one of the guys that was really rowdy and ready to take over the ship, as they're lowering the ship down, says, hey, you go distract that guy, and then we'll go get the guns so that we can just take the ship. That fails hard. And the two boats going out, Long John uses Jim as a hostage, like a bartering chip, so that they don't get shot. And instead of Jim just like sneaking aboard, he was told to keep friends with Long John, as to assuage any suspicion that they know a mutiny's coming. So that's part of the reason why he wanted to join them. But then the mutiny just happened, so they had to take the boats, because they were kind of ferrying the boat in, but they untied their boats and just left. Jim, as they're getting to land, hops off the boat, books it into the woods. Long John sends some men after him to get him, but Jim's able to give them the slip, immediately runs into Ben Gunn. Ben Gunn kind of gives him a look around, says, "Hey, I have a boat, cool. Here's what needs to happen, and here's what's happening. Okay, your guys are probably going to be in the stockade, so go ahead and head there. If you want your guy to talk to me, send him to me, and I'll give him a good talking." While in the stockade, Jim tries to convince Dr. Livesey to go talk to Ben Gunn. He eventually agrees, but they are first interrupted by Long John coming for a parley. The parley pretty much goes about how it does in the book, except for the fact that everyone that's hanging around Captain Smollett is supposed to be on guard duty, including Jim, but instead they're just hanging around. But in this, only like 2 guys were set on guard duty, while the rest were allowed to just follow. So they have their little parley, and then immediately the attack happens. So instead of the attack coming later, it's immediate. So the attack happens, they fight it off, Captain Smollett gets injured, 1 guy dies, but for the most part, it was a successful repelling of the attack. Good. That night, Jim decides to slip away, not of his own volition. He gets the idea to cut the anchor and whatnot from a conversation that they're having. That they have a fear that Long John, come morning, will take the ship, bring it in, and just level the stockade if he was smart. And they fear that Long John actually might be. So Jim sneaks off, goes, cuts the rope, immediately gets on to the ship instead of following it all night, because both the ship and him get caught in a current in the book. But he climbs aboard where Israel Hands and the other guy are fighting, and Israel Hands goes down. The other guy comes out, but gets a knife in the back, and you actually see the action instead of just coming upon it. He's bleeding out, but is trying to signal the cannon to get more people on board to the ship, but Jim stops him and then ends up shooting him. He actually says the line directly from the book, "One more step and I'll blow your brains out." So I give it full marks for that. So, yeah. Then Jim just kind of pilots the ship to be beached, climbs down after he has an injured arm now. He makes it back to the stockade, but he's extremely injured. In the book, it's just like it's like a flesh wound. He's generally fine, but in this, he's a lot more injured and like passes out when he sees that Long John and his pirates have taken over the stockade. Long John tries to treat the wounds and calls for the doctor to try and take care of Jim. The doctor comes. Then again, the scene plays out quite similarly to how it does in the book, except for the doctor's not there for the pirates. He's there for Jim specifically. The doctor also, once again, offers for him to leave, but he's like, "No, I've made a promise." And the doctor's warning to Captain Silver this time, instead of be wary of the wind if you go hunting for the treasure, it's stay close to Jim. And if we all survive this, I'll give you I'll try my best to save you from the stockade, essentially, or the gallows. Yeah, so they immediately set off for the treasure. So instead of the doctor giving the treasure map to Long John and his pirates because it was useless to them now, he had actually given it to Jim because he says that it's rightly Jim's and whatnot. And when Jim gets into the stockade after returning from his little adventure, the treasure map falls out of his shirt. Long John sees it, takes it, and that's where he convinces Jim that he actually did care for him, as, well, I already have the map. I could have easily, like, left you for dead and just let them kill you. But, no. I wanted you dead, etc., etc. Anyway, they go hunting for the treasure. They follow the map. It's, again, pretty much like how it is in the book. And except Ben Gunn doesn't try to scare them as the ghost of Flint, which I find kind of sad. Missed opportunity. Then they make it to where the treasure's supposed to be. And instead of them being mostly saved by the Doctor and company, the Doctor and company only kill one guy because Long John went pistols blazing and just killed pretty much every other guy there. And this time, instead of them marooning people, they just leave, and because all the other pirates died. But instead of actually leaving fully, Long John does a last-minute extra betrayal, gets off with the biggest chest of the treasure, and the rest just kind of go to the normal ship with the bit of treasure that they have. I mean, it's hard to tell exactly how much treasure there was supposed to be, because this actually gives proper, like, amounts, yet at the same time, it's a lot less than what you see in the book. In the book, it's like a massive mound of treasure, and they have to load it into bread bags, and they have to do multiple trips back and forth to the ship to get it loaded on. But in this, it's like a couple chests. Long John supposedly gets away with the biggest of the chests. So yeah, he succeeds, ? And Dr. Livesey's like, oh, I kind of hope, I kind of find it in my heart to hope that he'll make it. And it's like, okay, cool. We'll just leave his thing even more of a question than it was in the original book. Because in the original book, he gets away, yeah, but he leaves, like, in Mexico or somewhere in Central America or the islands when they stop to pick up a crew. That's when he makes his escape, and he only takes a bag of treasure. So, yeah. Otherwise, pretty faithful adaptation, and overall, not terrible. It drags a little bit, and it still has a bunch of the Jim doing dumb stuff, but for the most part, it's not bad. I kind of appreciated the kind of speeding up of the story a little bit at the beginning and the middle, and slightly expanding on the journey was kind of nice as well. So overall, I give it, it's okay. It's not bad. It's a movie from the 50s, so it's going to drag a little bit, but for the most part, it's fine. Now, we go on to the second adaptation that we're going to talk about today, that being Treasure Planet. Now, Treasure Planet is a sci-fi adaptation of the book Treasure Island, and for the most part, it follows the kind of key bits, but otherwise it has a lot of changes. There are characters completely missing, or they've been formed into one person, or they have a different fate, maybe. So let's get started. So the movie opens with the recounting of Captain Flint's adventures, and the big question of how did he do it. So Captain Flint would come in out of nowhere, attack ships, loot them, plunder them, and then disappear without a trace, and they didn't know how. And the idea of a treasure planet where he buried all of his treasure is common knowledge. In fact, it's in the books, which these books are like normal books, but they also have projectors in it, and they kind of remind me of those books that you get. I don't know if you can still get them, but you used to be able to get them when I was a kid at least, where it's a book with a speaker on the side and buttons that you kind of press for each thing. It's weird. But yeah, so he's reading that as a kid. His mom comes in, and they both sit there and look at the book together, and it's like a weird foretelling of like iPad kids, because he's there with the book under the sheets, and he has the light shining on him. I was like, well, that's weirdly poignant. That's kind of funny. But Yeah, so he's completely obsessed with pirates and adventure and whatnot. And then we jump 12 years later. So, according to, like, if you Google it, supposedly he's about 15 in this movie. So he's been aged up a little bit from his other versions. But he's not as aged up as you would think. It's kind of saying that he was, like, two, 3 when the little opening happened. And then we jump forward 12 years. But he's now an edgy 2000s teen. He's angsty. So much angst. He's out on his little mini solar sailor. And he's going into restricted areas and being brought back by the cops. Yeah, it's definitely one of those movies that scream it's early 2000s. Because we have so much edge. And you feel it, especially in the early half of the film. But it's supposed to be like he's acting out this way because, well, he feels trapped. One, you know, he has had that obsession with pirates and adventure his whole life. So, of course, he feels locked in. But also, it's because he didn't have a father figure in his life to help guide him is the overall message of the film, I guess. Because, yeah, he goes in and he tries to explain it to his mom and everything, but it just doesn't work out how he hopes. Then, like, that night or at some point, he sees a ship crash on, like, one of the little dock things, so he runs out to see what happened and help whoever crashed, and it's Billy Bones. He's like a turtle lizard guy, and he comes out and he's like, the cyborg's coming. He's coming for my chest and whatnot. Jim's able to get him into the inn where his mom has been talking with a family friend called Dr. Doppler, and he is this movie's version of both Dr. Livesey and Squire Trelawney kind of mashed into one. Except for he's not a doctor. He's an astronomer. He has a doctorate, but yeah, he doesn't do medicine. So they try to help the turtle lizard guy, but he's dead. And he gave Jim the map to be like, hey, here, take this. I don't want him to have it. And beware the cyborg. And he dies. So then immediately the pirates attack, and the cyborg is amongst them. So Jim, his mom, and Dr. Doppler have to escape now. They make their escape. Not Admiral Benbow, it's the Benbow Inn now, gets burned down, and they make their hasty escape to the doctor's residence, where they discovered that the sphere thing that the turtle guy left them is a map. And it leads to Treasure Island. Amazing. And Jim's like, well, we have to go after it, because then we can rebuild the inn and whatnot. And his mom's like, I don't think so. And the doctor's like, I agree. He can't go alone, so that's why I'm going with him. Because this is also a chance for me to have a great taste of adventure twist. So, and plus, it'll build character and whatnot to get him out in space. So his mom eventually relents and is like, okay. So then they set off to gather a crew. And, well, actually they don't gather a crew. They just kind of go to the thing. This time there's not the worry of, like, the crew knows of the treasure. Though they kind of slightly reference Trelawney's loose lips in this version. As when they get on the ship, he's like, but we have a treasure map. And the captain's like, shut the fuck up. In the cabin now. And she's like, stop that. We're locking the map down. And just stop being you. Now, the captain this time is not Captain Smollett. It's Captain Amelia. I don't know why. It works okay, but they don't really do much different. Except for the fact that she gets injured a lot faster because this movie decides to spend even more time on the journey to the island. You know, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. So yeah, because this movie wants to focus more on the relationship between John and Jim and the kind of semi-father-son dynamic that they have on the journey to the island, and using that as a way for him to actually have some kind of reason for his flip-flopping back and forth, because he's had a lifelong obsession of getting this treasure, but at the same time, I mean, hey, the boy was nice. Yeah, that's kind of where the biggest change happens, is on the journey there, because the Dr. Doppler did hire the crew, and this time, the entire crew, save for Mr. Harrow, the entire crew except for Mr. Harrow and the captain, are completely on Long John's side. It's not a matter of them like winning the crew over or anything. It's just they are all Long John's people. Now, there is a bit of a weird thing, as they don't really give much of a reason as to why they didn't just immediately mutiny at that point or anything. And for the most part, the like discovery and whatnot's about the same, except for, again, the mutiny happens immediately. Except for this time, instead of them on their way to the island, or in this case, planet, it's, Jim overheard the conversation, immediately attacked Long John when Long John turns back to go get his spyglass, and so they have to get out now. There's a mad dash, a fight over the map. They, dive off down towards the planet, get shot by an electrical cannonball, I guess, and the ship goes down. The captain is injured and is taken care of by Dr. Doppler. Jim is sent off to scout ahead to find shelter for them, and he runs into Ben, a robot that was left on the island, or the planet, for reasons that they get into later. So there's the stockade scene where he comes in to have a discussion with them and gets mad and whatnot and leaves. But there's not really an attack. Jim leaves out the back to go up to the ship to try and actually get the map, and ends up fighting with the Israel Hands equivalent, which is this spider guy. He's a combination of Israel Hands and I think it's a Morgan or something from the book and the other movie, because he's also the one that kind of pushed to get things going faster, and he's also the one that kills or leaves Mr. Harrow to his doom during a storm. But he instead of getting shot to death, floats off into space when the gravity's turned off and is presumed dead. It's I guess an ironic-ish death, as it mirrors the way he killed Mr. Harrow. But yeah, a lot of hullabaloo. Jim goes back to the stockade equivalent to find that the pirates are already there, and they just took everyone. Jim opens up the map, shows them where they kind of need, that it kind of is leading them where they need to go, but leverages that to have him and everyone else taken with the pirates. So they put the orb in the ground, and it opens up a door, and it's like, it's a portal opener thing, and we can just kind of move it around to different locations. That's how he did it. That's how he robbed all these places and disappeared without a trace. Cool. So where's the treasure then? Well, it's in the center of the planet, because it's in the center of the mechanism, and the planet's the mechanism. So you just have to open the right door. Boom, there's the treasure. They go in, and they find a bunch of treasure, as well as Captain Flint. Captain Flint is in a ship. He died with his treasure, and he's holding in his hand the memory chip of Ben, because he had ripped out Ben's memory, and that's why he's a bit crazy. And so Jim takes it, puts it back in, and Ben's like, right, that's what happened. Captain Flint ripped out my memory chip so that they wouldn't know that the treasure was booby-trapped. And it will destroy the planet. And so the planet starts self-destructing. So they have to try to get out. This is where Captain Long John Silver actually has a change of heart and saves Jim over the treasure. And then they make it back, but they're not going to be able to escape the planet's, destruction unless they go back through the portal. Jim has his big heroic moment where he goes to change the portal over to the right place, and then they make it through just in time as the planet explodes. As they're making their way back to the spaceport, Long John slips away to try and escape. Jim goes by to, kind of stop him, shows that, hey, I learned some stuff. Long John gives Jim Morph, which is this movie's equivalent of Captain Flint the Bird, except for he's a weird goo bubble thing. Jim lets Long John leave. Long John tosses him some treasure so that his mom can rebuild her inn. And then there's like a little epilogue thing where the captain and the doctor got together and had kids. Jim went to a space academy, I guess, and graduated, presumably. And then the inn was rebuilt and reopened. It's not exactly it doesn't say how long it's been. It's been at least, numbers of months, potentially even like a year or so since the whole treasure planet thing. But yeah, overall, it's fine. He looks out the window wistfully and sees Long John in space clouds, and the movie ends. It's pretty good. It's from that era around the dying of 2D animation at Disney. Like, it's kind of what kicked off the death of 2D animation before eventually it fully died around 2008. But, yeah, it's pretty good. It's not terribly long. It's only like 10 minutes longer than the 1950s version. And it's an interesting way to adapt a classic, book to make it sci-fi. It's not the first time that this idea was done. I believe actually in the 80s, another movie by the title of Treasure Planet was also made. So it's not wholly unique in its idea, but it is interesting, especially the way that they decided to do it, where it's pretty much the same story, but in space. Like, it's not like super spaceships or anything. It's like water ships, but as if you threw them into space. And they use solar sails, which is like an actual scientific theory thing that you can do. But they're used as actual sails to power the engines and whatnot. It's very interesting, and like the solar sails are used like solar panels. But yeah, I mean, overall, I would recommend it. It's a bit more of a fun version if you can get past all of the angst that the movie loves to roll out. And again, it has a bit of a weird message of just like, oh man, if only he had a father figure in his life earlier. Like, we do get a bit of a flashback as to what happened to his father. And it's that growing up, his father was like a spacefaring guy, and he would come back for short-ish periods of time and then leave again, until at one point he left and never came back. And yeah, it's not fully explained like what happened to him, but it's you get the gist. He either died at sea, or he just decided not to come back to his family. Having the yearning for the sea, or in this case space, that he always had. Which, I mean, hey, that's more depth than his dad had in the book, and more existence than he had in the 1950s movie, because he literally wasn't at all even really mentioned in the 1950s movie. And in the book, he kind of sits there, gets bullied by Billy Bones for like a few months, and then dies. That's it. He doesn't even he's not the catalyst or anything. He's not the inspiration for Jim or anything. He just dies. And then immediately the same day in the book, Billy Bones dies, and that's the catalyst to get the adventure going. Ugh. It's very silly. And Jim technically had more emotion over Billy Bones dying than his dad. The reason being that, like, Billy Bones' death was what set him over the top, because he had too many people die at the same time. So, yeah, it's silly. But overall, that is that. It's pretty good. But with that said, what's happening next week? Well, next week I am looking at doing Mass Effect. Now, for those of you following the challenge, you will know that I already did Mass Effect over on the challenge on RPG Hangouts feed, and yes, so I finished the game, so I'm going to talk about it here as well. If you want to hear some of my thoughts on it early, go ahead and check out my episode on it on the RPG Hangout feed for the challenge, or you can wait until next week and I'll be talking about it here. Afterwards, I still have to make plans on what I plan on doing. Otherwise, that's about that. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you guys enjoyed this and you're watching / listening on YouTube, feel free to give it a like, comment, and subscribe. Or if you are listening to it on any podcast catcher of your choice, feel free to rate and review it and share it with your friends. But with that said, thank you guys once again so much for listening. I will talk to you guys next week. Goodbye.